The dust rolled like soft brown clouds across the valley as the sun crept over the desert rim, and the ranchers of Coyote Bend were only just stirring awake when the ground trembled under a slow, steady rhythm of footsteps. Most men would have assumed it was a nearby herd of buffalo or a wagon train rolling too fast. But Jacob Holt knew better. He had felt that subtle quake once before, the day a shadow blocked the sun and he found himself looking up, way up, into the eyes of the tallest woman he had ever seen in his life. He never expected to see her again. Yet that morning, as he stepped outside his small cabin with his hat still in his hand, he saw her silhouette appear between the old cedar posts of the fence line, towering above every beam and board of the ranch. Her name was Nada, a giant Apache woman, warrior-born, her tribe scattered, her people nearly erased by the marching boots of soldiers and the greed of settlers. She stood nearly twice the height of a normal human, with shoulders broad as a wagon yoke and legs like carved pillars of bronze. But it wasn't her size that locked Jacob's breath in his throat. It was her eyes, sharp as an eagle's but carrying a loneliness he'd never been able to forget. Jacob swallowed as she approached, feeling heat rush into his cheeks that had nothing to do with the rising sun. He had always been soft-spoken, a man whose courage was found in the quiet things, tending to his horses, fixing fences no one else cared about, mending the land instead of fighting over it. But when Nada stepped close, the air seemed to pull tight around them like the first breath before a storm. "You remember me, rancher?" she asked, her deep voice rolling like distant thunder, softened by something he couldn't quite name. Hard not to, Jacob managed, which earned the faintest smile from her. A smile that felt like watching dawn itself break. She crouched down so their eyes met more levelly, and even then she remained taller than him. Her long raven braids slid over her shoulders as she studied the ranch behind him. The empty corrals, the abandoned fields. "You here alone now?" Jacob nodded. "Workers left months ago. Too much trouble with the drought. And the soldiers." Nada's expression darkened at the mention of soldiers, and her massive hand curled slightly at her side, as if remembering old wounds. But then she exhaled slowly, a sound heavy enough to stir the dust at Jacob's boots. "I have been traveling many months," she said. "Far from my people, far from anyone." Her voice grew quieter. "And I haven't spoken to anyone like this in a long time. Haven't had companionship, conversation, connection." She hesitated, lowering her eyes. "I have not been close to anyone in months." Jacob felt his heartbeat stutter. The honesty in her words startled him, not because of what she said, but because she looked almost embarrassed to say it. This towering woman who could lift a wagon with one hand, who had walked deserts alone, who feared nothing, was confessing loneliness. She quickly clarified, her tone both vulnerable and proud. "Not in the way your mind jumps to, rancher," she added gently. "I mean, no one to trust, no one to laugh with, no one to share silence with." She looked around at the empty ranch, then back at him. "I came here because I remembered your eyes. You looked at me like I was not a monster." Jacob opened his mouth to speak, but the words tangled. Instead, he stepped forward and reached out, touching her hand, a hand larger than his entire chest, and felt her flinch not from fear but from surprise. "You're not a monster, Nada," he said quietly. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." She studied him, and something in her posture softened, her shoulders sinking, just a little as though she had been carrying the weight of a mountain. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of approaching hooves. Jacob stiffened. "Riders," he whispered. Nada stepped protectively between him and the ridge. "Soldiers." Jacob nodded. "They patrol this area now, looking for any Apache, normal or giant." Her jaw tightened. "Then I came at the wrong time." "No," Jacob said firmly. "You came at exactly the right time." Before she could respond, he grabbed her hand again, small against hers but steady, and pulled her toward the old barn at the edge of the ranch. "Come on, I'll keep you safe." "This ranch?" "It's not much, but it's yours to rest in, as long as you like." For a moment she didn't move, studying him like she couldn't quite believe what he had said. Then she nodded and followed, her footsteps shaking the dry earth as she ducked under the roof beams. Inside she sat down, folding her long legs with effort, her head nearly touching the rafters. Jacob stood close, breathless from the adrenaline but unable to ignore the warmth radiating from her. "Why risk helping me?" she asked quietly. Jacob shrugged. "Maybe because you helped me once. Maybe because you deserve a place to feel safe. Maybe because... He looked at her, really looked at her. Maybe because no one should walk the world alone. For the first time, her stern warrior expression melted entirely. She touched his cheek with a finger as wide as a hammer handle but gentle as a whisper. Then maybe, she murmured, I will stay. For a while. And as the soldiers' hoofbeats echoed over the hills, Jacob Holt realized that his quiet ranch and his quiet life had just changed forever. The days that followed moved like the slow turning of a wagon wheel, each one heavier and fuller than the last. From sunrise to sunset, Jacob found himself adjusting to the presence of someone who seemed carved from myth and legend. Now to walk the ranch with graceful power, her footsteps leaving deeper impressions than the horses, her shadow stretching across the fields like a living sundial. Yet despite her size, she never intruded on his space. Instead, she moved as if the world were fragile and she alone was made to protect it. Jacob saw her strength in everything she did, lifting fallen beams with a single hand, bringing water from the well in a barrel she carried like a bucket. But it was her quiet moments that struck him hardest. When she sat at dusk, gazing at the horizon with an expression too ancient for any young face. When she traced the scars on her arms, remembering battles she refused to speak of. When she smiled at him with a softness that felt rarer than rain. One evening, as the sun bled crimson over the desert and painted the sky in fire, Jacob found her sitting near the corral, where the horses grazed nervously at her presence. She rested her elbows on her knees, her massive frame bent forward, and stared off at the mountains. Jacob walked to her side cautiously. You okay? She didn't answer right away. Her voice when she spoke was low and almost fragile. In my tribe I was not considered strange, she said. I was born from a line of tall women, warriors, protectors. But when the soldiers came, when my people fled north, I became a giant walking alone. Every place I go, men fear me. She glanced at him with the shadow of a smile. Except you. Jacob sat beside her, his shoulder barely reaching the height of her forearm. I don't fear you, he said. I admire you. She looked at him so. Suddenly he felt his heartbeat climb into his throat. You admire a woman who could crush a wagon? She teased gently. I admire someone who survived losing everything, he replied. Her gaze softened further. Do you know why I told you that I hadn't been close to anyone in months? Why I said it so bluntly? Jacob swallowed. I figured you were lonely. Jacob grabbed her hand. She squeezed back, gently but firmly, reassurance in the middle of danger. I'm not leaving, he said. She nodded. Then neither will I. And in that moment, as dust swirled, rifles glinted and the sun beat down on the tense standoff, Jacob realized something bigger than fear or danger. When the world rose against her, he would rise with her. And Nada realized something too, that after months of walking alone, she had finally found someone who saw the sky-tall woman not as a monster or myth, but as a person worth standing beside. Whatever came next, they would face together. And for the first time in her long, lonely journey, she did not feel alone.